Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Lincoln Murphy with us. Lincoln, thanks for coming on the program.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about our conversation today. I've read your blog before I even started Growth Hacker TV. I'd come across it, read some articles, and just kind of made a mental note, like, all right, this guy has an angle that I like. And then you kind of resurfaced as someone to interview, and I instantly said, yep, get him on the show. I want to talk to him. And so I'm actually really excited to have you here. But for those that don't know you, maybe like I have before, let me tell them a little bit about you. You're a consultant with a very specific focus. Since 2006, you've helped hundreds of companies as a conversion rate optimization expert. A little bit of a mouthful there. And you've been guiding SaaS companies to acquire users, convert users, and reduce churn. So let's start with your title there, Conversion Rate Optimization Expert. And I don't know if that's what you print on your business card or not, but it's one of the many titles you probably use as you do what you do. What does that mean, Conversion Rate Optimization?
Well, it's funny. I think I use a different title at least every week, and it depends on who I'm talking to, and I haven't had business cards for like 3 years.
Yeah.
Conversion rate optimization, forget about the expert stuff. Really what it means is let's get people to become paying customers. And then, what's funny though, that particular title, I don't even like that because I don't want to stop with just getting people to become paying customers. I want to keep them. So what is that? It's retention rate optimization, right? It really runs the full gamut of sort of, customer lifetime something. I don't know, we'll figure out a good title. But, the reality is what I do is like you said, I help companies get customers and keep customers. Mm-hmm. And that's the gist of it. My focus is primarily on B2B SaaS companies, and that in and of itself is it's not incredibly clear what that means, right? Because you have your very large enterprise SaaS companies all the way to sort of very self-service utility type of companies and everything in between. So even there it's not incredibly clear who really benefits from what I have to offer, but it's definitely within that niche.
Yeah, I think B2B and SaaS breaks it down enough where we got an idea of what your target is there. How did you start working with SaaS companies? Is it just something you kind of fell into? Was it a strategic decision? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I think this will be relevant if I give you a little bit of my background. So all the way back into like the 90s, I actually started out doing stuff in supply chain management. And I don't tell the story very often because I don't get asked about it, but I think it's relevant here.
Yeah.
Supply chain management's basically, where, so I was working in with grocery stores and that kind of stuff. So we were literally moving product from the distributor down to the retail side. And what's interesting about that is this was really business processes that were driven by technology, right? So I kind of came up in this very network-centric business processes driven by technology world, and I did that until about 2004. That part of my life kind of culminated with a position as a business architect at McKesson Corporation, which was like Fortune 17 at the time. And we were a pharmaceutical distributor selling drugs to like Tylenol and stuff like that to Walmart and the federal government. And really one of the only companies I've ever been even that I have any exposure to that could tell Walmart what to do. Mm-hmm. So they're very powerful. And we're doing really crazy stuff with using technology to drive very interesting business processes. So this is the mentality that I kind of came up with. And towards the end of my run in supply chain management, obviously we were using the internet a lot more. When I first started, we were using private networks and things like that. But that's not really the point. The point was even way back then, and then back into the 60s and 70s or whatever, it was still this network-centric model. And so I've always sort of, even though I was doing that and I was working for big companies, and really McKesson was my last real job, I always had this sort of entrepreneurial drive. And so I quit and started a company which was actually in mail center management, mail rooms. Just this weird idea that I had. Actually, it started even earlier than that with being able to sort of visualize your mail at like private mailboxes, like mailboxes, et cetera, at the time or whatever, UPS store. And I realized that was maybe not a big enough play. And so I kind of went back to my enterprise roots, and I was like, how do we get this into big companies like Exxon Mobil, for example, which had they actually have automation equipment for inbound mail. It was really a big deal. So like, how do we build something for that? Didn't have really an idea of what it was going to be. Started talking to people doing what we would now consider to be customer development, figure out where the problems are, build a solution for that. And here I am selling, basically it's a web-based product. Everything else in the market was, installed behind the firewall, whatever. Actually, in this case, on really crappy old computers in really dirty rooms, and I came in with this really new way of thinking about stuff. And, turns out I was selling SaaS. Turns out I was selling SaaS into large enterprises. And it turns out I was unsuccessful in a lot of ways. And, a couple of years later, by 2006, basically gave up and in a way at least came off not owing too many people too much money. But I learned a lot about, we had some success, actually selling this stuff, but, I also learned a lot about what wasn't working. And, I basically started making a lot of noise. Silicon Valley was saying SaaS, because the term now SaaS had come out, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And here I am I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I was basically selling to a lot of local companies and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. No, SaaS is not ubiquitous. It's really hard to sell into enterprises. Here's the pushback we're getting. Here's the lessons learned. And, that actually at the time was enough to get people to sort of take notice of me, even not being out in Silicon Valley. I started making some noise like that. And, I realized that I actually had some interesting perspectives and some things that people might be interested in hearing. So I started consulting some earlier SaaS companies at the time. Then about 2008, actually early 2008, I joined a startup that was a platform as a service company called Morph, very similar to Heroku One. Morph ran out of money by the end of the year, and I went back to consulting. Kind of said no more, putting all my eggs in one basket, kind of thing. And I formalized my consulting from that point at 16 Ventures. Anyway, so long story short, it wasn't a strategic decision to become a SaaS guy. It was more, I was an entrepreneur. I really wanted, or I am an entrepreneur. I wanted to start something. I quit my job to do that, and it wasn't necessarily the biggest success that thing was, but it was the catalyst, to get to me to sort of where I am today. So I think it's really that background. Like, I didn't come from enterprise software. I used to be a developer. I used to write code, kind of had to in that world, a lot of really weird mid-range code. And I did end up doing some web stuff in like Cold Fusion and things like that. But that's a long time ago. But I had that more network-centric supply chain upbringing. I think that's what allowed me to. So in 2008, I published like the 7 SaaS revenue streams, which is a kind of it's a PDF report. It's on my site at 16ventures.com. Sort of the first time somebody really ever broken down all the different revenue models that could come from the network centricity that SaaS has. And I started looking at SaaS as a business architecture because, again, that's sort of how I was thinking about it. It wasn't just a software delivery method, And some of that's, I think, what kind of allowed me to look at things differently was not coming from like, let's just write installed software that sort of can sit there by itself. I was never in a world where technology in one company wasn't affected by technology in another company, or where we didn't share things on the network. That just didn't exist in my world. So it was a very easy transition, but it certainly wasn't strategic.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
No, absolutely. And it's a great story, and I'm glad you kind of told us how you got here. And that's a part of the problem I had when thinking about where I wanted to take this conversation, because you have so much experience with your own ventures and with all the people you consult for, that every time I said, I want to make the conversation about this, I felt like I was leaving out something. So I decided not to leave out anything. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of walk through SaaS from the beginning to the end. And I want us to talk about some of the major questions, some of the major concerns, the major hurdles that you see a lot of people have. So let's start at the beginning. What should a SaaS company be thinking about before they actually deploy a product, before they have a product, before they start production, before they have a design, before they start coding? What should be going through their head to set themselves up for success, in your opinion?
The customer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Above all, now, I mean, we all have great ideas, right? I mean, ideas come to us all the time, and I don't want to get into the ideas are a dime a dozen discussion. I don't actually agree with that, but I think at the end of the day, if you're trying to build a business, even if you're looking at something that's horizontal and could serve, just about anybody, I still think you need to go to the idea with a specific customer in mind. So I'm of the idea of, going in for that specific customer and then doing the bowling pin analogy of hit one and then start knocking down the rest as you grow, rather than trying to go sort of product centric and say, hey everybody, we're here for anybody, come find us. And then at that point, you're not really talking to anybody. You're not getting really good feedback. So go in with a specific customer in mind. I think you'll avoid a lot of the problems that a lot of entrepreneurs and startup founders and startups, even funded ones, they get to a point where they can't figure out how to grow.
Mm-hmm.
They can't really figure out how to get started, and it's because they don't know who they're doing this for.
Yeah.
So a lot of the companies I talk to, I talk to a lot of just sort of single founder, very early stage companies, and most of the time I just give a little bit of advice, and then when they're ready they can come back and we can discuss working together. But one of the things I tell them is, if you can't figure out, I'll ask them a question: why did you build this?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you start on this? And very often it was something that they were doing for themselves,
mm-hmm.
right? Okay, cool. Are there more of you out there? Yeah, okay, cool. So let's talk about you, and let's think about why you would use this product, and why did you switch? Why was it so compelling for you to actually go out and build this thing? Mm-hmm. That's the thing about with technology founders. And I think this is probably the case for technology. This is the case if you're a carpenter. You can build something really easily, or easily. It's
mm-hmm.
it's all relative, and you don't really respect what you've built because it was easy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Ron Swanson on Parks and Rec and actually in real life, can build a coffee table in his sleep, and it was nothing. To me, that's like the craziest thing in the world, right?
Uh-huh.
And the same thing is for technologists, can sit down and just write code, and all of a sudden there's a product. You have to respect that other people are going to really value that,
mm-hmm.
But they may not immediately see that. But there's probably somebody, and it may be just like you. The reason that you built it, you see this problem. Mm-hmm. There might be other people just like you, and so that could be your first customer, is other people like you. So I say absolutely focus on the customer. Technology. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but you know what? At the end of the day, sometimes it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's not about the product. It's really about making sure that you're lining with somebody out there that's going to resonate with what you're doing, so that eventually they'll pay you money, because otherwise it's hard to make a living.
Yeah, and I love one of the things you said in there, which is, it's obvious when we're talking about a vertical product that you need to understand the seller. It's not as obvious when we talk about a horizontal product that you still have to start with the first bowling pin and then move out from there. You have to have a target that's narrow, at least initially, even if long term the target is broader. I think that's a very wise kind of strategy early on, kind of before you have a product, the way you need to be thinking. So I like that. Now, let me ask you this. When it comes to rolling out a beta, what do companies do during that beta phase that can really set them up for success? What are they trying to accomplish? What are they trying to avoid? What does beta look like if they know what they're doing?
Yeah, and I think the key point is there, if they know what they're doing. I mean, what does beta typically look like? And what are people typically? What are the entrepreneurs or the startups typically doing with a startup or with their beta? I don't even think we need to talk about that, because what they might be trying to literally avoid going to market, so that they don't ever have to fail. Mm-hmm. If they can always just be in this perpetual beta, then it takes a lot of the pressure off. And I'm sympathetic to that. I understand. I mean, this is human nature. On the flip side, look, if you're doing this because you want to build a business, then we need to get serious. And you need to get out there and get paying customers, because the feedback that you get from somebody who's paying you money is going to be completely different from the feedback that you get from anybody else, whether it's free users, after you've exited beta, or certainly whether it's your beta users. So what should you do to be successful with the beta launch? Well, first of all, it should be a finite amount of time. And really what I say is, I would rather put out, so getting into the lean startup stuff and sort of this MVP idea, I would rather put out an MVP that's something that people will pay money for than beta, because again, it's all about feedback and learning and then being able to iterate on that. If you put out beta, it's basically telling people, this is not ready for prime time. This is not a commercially viable product yet. And that may not be what your intention is, right? Your intention is, well, gosh, other products put beta tags on there. I'm trying to ease in. I'm trying to put my, sort of tiptoe in the water. But the reality is you're sending some messages. And the very first message is, at least today still, I think that there's still enough people out there that sort of understand what beta used to be, which was literally just, we're testing it outside of our organization, right? I think that there's still enough people that say, I'm not going to invest my time and effort and energy into this product yet because it's clearly not ready. If you took your MVP approach and said, well, here's the minimum amount of features that we know that people need, some people may find that it's not complete enough for them, but some people are going to say this is just enough. It's ready for prime time. I'm going to go ahead and invest my effort and energy into it as well as money. And that's what we want from people. We want them to do that. Now, if you are going to do a public beta, you have to look at it from a lot of different angles. Number one, it's marketing. It's a way to drive interest. It's a way to get people excited. You can do an invite system and sort of stagger, allowing people in. But I say also it should be structured. If you just let people, it's just like, and we'll talk about, getting people on board and engaging them later. But if you look at the beta as the same sort of thing, when people come in, if we just let them kick the tire, fend for themselves in there, and then hope that they report to us, which is what we, again, if we're doing beta right, it's because we want some feedback from a larger swath of potential customers. We basically let them in and they just kind of walk around and kick the tires and poke at things. We may not get the feedback that we really want. So what I suggest is having it very structured. Say, here, I'm going to give you some tasks that I would like you to accomplish. And then I would like your feedback on those. Now, you can also go and do other stuff, but every week you basically send out, here's a couple of things we'd like you to accomplish. And the way that you learn from that is so very different than just sort of this random, occasional feedback that you get. So I would go at it in sort of twofold. One, have a very structured method once you do let people in of having certain scenarios that you'd like them to walk through and then give you feedback on, as well as being able to monitor them. There's tools that you can record their sessions. I would use all of those things. There's a lot at our disposal to really make this super powerful. On the flip side, on the marketing side, I would use your beta as a way to build a list of people that you can eventually launch to, and then and to build interest and anticipation. There's a lot of psychology that goes into it, but beta can be part of that launch. I also think you need to understand that your beta users are really those super, even before the early adopters, right? They're the innovators. They're the folks that really want to, they believe that there's something here, or maybe they just want to be a part of something new. They're going to go out and try stuff, but they may not be potential customers. We just have to recognize that. So don't be discouraged if you have a lot of people using your beta, and when you launch, when you finally pull the trigger, you don't get a massive influx of new customers. We just have to, I like to manage those expectations. It depends, you might, but kind of temper your expectations there. And then, but still use that list that you're building to launch against. And I think that's where, people that are coming out of beta or they're going to launch, when you ask them, what does that mean? They don't really know. I didn't really think about it. We're going to, take the beta tag off on the 31st or whatever. It's like, okay. Well, had you built a list up and you've done a lot of work to build that anticipation, your launch is probably going to go a lot better. That's the other thing. If you do have an invite system, or you have this way of sort of building this list, make sure you're communicating to that list frequently. Otherwise, once you do send the invite, or once you do launch, your email may go right to spam. People might delete it, because they hadn't heard from you in the 3 months since they signed up for your beta. So make sure, it all has to be orchestrated, just like all of this stuff is. It needs to be fully orchestrated, and so take it serious. I have a couple of videos on my site, talk about beta and pricing. When do you display your pricing? So there's like at least an hour's worth of video just on that one topic. That I think is it's interesting, But again, mixing sort of commercial aspects like pricing with this idea of beta being not ready for, not commercially viable yet, that causes a lot of confusion too.
If I were to boil down what you just said, it seems like you're saying use beta as a tool and not a crutch. Don't go into beta because you're afraid to launch and because you're afraid of rejection. Go into beta with a set of goals. I want to know this. I want to learn this. I want to try this. I want to have accomplished this. So it's not just removing a beta tag on the 31st. It's I reached my goals, and now we're in a better position to launch because of beta. Is that kind of a fair summary?
That's beautiful. We could have saved like 10 minutes.
Perfect. Now, talk to me about pricing a little bit. And since you gave us a teaser, you got to tell us what you think about it. Should we price during beta? That's one of the things I want you to answer. But then also, talk to us about pricing in terms of, is the 3 kind of staggered pricing the best idea? They always have the middle one highlighted, and it's the one that most people use, best value. I mean, we see all this stuff, so we assume it's what works. Is it really what works? I mean, how do you help people price their offerings? Because it's always tricky. I mean, what are bits and bytes worth? I mean, what people will pay. I mean, it's hard to know. So
exactly.
How do you approach pricing?
Okay, so first of all, on the beta pricing idea, I'm of the opinion that you should probably not publish your pricing during beta, or at least put a lot of sort of disclaimers there. But when you have to do disclaimers, I say probably don't do it. The reason is, if you're using your beta correctly, you will get some interesting feedback, and so not just feedback literally from the people to you, but watching their behavior, seeing where things are going. And so this goes into how do you develop your pricing. Well, you need to make sure that your prices are based around things that people find to be valuable. And I follow the value pricing model, which is, we're going to price it based on, like you said, what value somebody's going to get from it. So I don't care about, I need to reach this margin or whatever. We'll talk about that. So in beta, while you're observing people use it in ways that you maybe hadn't before, you might start to see that they don't really care about this particular file upload thing. Yet you were originally going to price based on number of files uploaded, right? That's not what they're using it for. So then you have to go back and change your pricing. Or maybe there's just other learning that you got that basically says what you had originally published is wrong, and you need to go this other direction. So what happens is then you go back to all the people that you attracted for the beta who saw your pricing, and now you have to change it. And so you're launching, or you're basically starting out with some unnecessary baggage. Yeah. The other thing you can do during beta is ask questions, do some customer development. So at the very least, your beta customers feel like they were a part of it, or your beta users feel like they were a part of it. So maybe they'll be like, hey, that's the pricing I came up with. They can't really complain that it was too high, or that it's too high, because they're the ones that were a part of the process.
Yeah.
So from beta standpoint, just be really careful, because it's not a commercial part of your life cycle, theoretically, and putting pricing on that, when you're not really ready, is just a problem. I've seen a lot of companies. It hasn't happened in a big way in a while. I think people are starting to learn. But I've seen some pricing fiascos in the last few years, or probably, like I said, it hasn't happened probably about a year and a half that I can really think of. But for a while there, people would change their pricing on their site, and it would upset a lot of people. Including their current customers, because maybe they dropped the price, or maybe they increased the price and their current customers got scared. So just avoid a lot of that mess by not publishing your prices during beta.
Yeah.
If you need a compromise, you can just manage expectations by saying, at this point, we think it's going to be this, because people may not want to invest the time and effort in getting to sort of know your product if they aren't sure at the other end that they're going to be able to afford it.
Yeah.
So you may need to do that, but I would say don't publish it, and then if a lot of people are asking you questions, then sort of talk about it behind the scenes with your beta users. Yeah. Keep the outside world kind of guessing. Now, going into how do you develop your pricing? There are several inputs that you need to figure out. One of the things I like to say, I'll screw it up, but I normally say something like, price is an input on a spreadsheet, not a result or not an output from a spreadsheet or from a formula. See, I screwed it up. So that means you can't really sit there and figure out what you should price your product at based on a formula, based on inputs, and so you say here's the price and here's the margin we want and whatever. And you can't even really say that based on what your competitors are doing. You can, but it's probably not advisable, because we don't know if our competitors are doing things right. The assumption is everybody in our market is doing everything right. They know what's best, and we should just copy them. And so we'll talk about sort of pricing, layout, and design and stuff like that in a minute. But you really need to know about your customers. And so some of the things you need to know are, what value are they going to get out of this? And if it's something to do with financial transactions, or just things that are sort of really quantifiable, and I mean, you can really sit there and figure out, like, this is the value that they're going to get out, the ROI from using your product. Then all of a sudden, doing something like what I say is the 10x rule is very easy. What that means is, if they can get $100 in ROI from your product, then charge them $10. That's an easy calculation to do. Some things you're not going to be able to do that really very, very easily, especially if it's new. But this goes back to just go understand your customers. Figure out, are they going to save time? Okay, there's a value on that. Are they going to save money? Are they going to be able to take advantage of new opportunities? Try to figure that out. And I guarantee you, at first, you're not going to get it perfect. And pricing isn't something that once you're done with it, you're done. It's a continually evolving thing. And that might mean that the actual price is going to change. It might mean that you're going to start with one plan and you're going to add multiple plans as you start to see where things sort of maybe the different market segments start to appear. So you're going to take that one price, and now you have three, but it's three very different use cases, or three very different segments. So basically, you take the value that your customers are going to get. Then you take things like the metrics that you're going to base your price around. So storage is a typical one, but storage is so awful because it's such a commodity metric. And if I'm buying storage, if I'm buying something that's all about storage, then maybe that's fine. But if I'm buying a CRM system, and one of the things I get with that is a gigabyte of storage, and then the next pricing tier up is 2 gigabytes of storage, is that really where I'm finding my value? One of the biggest problems. So I don't want to talk about the stuff that everybody's always talks about. I want to get to some specific examples, but like one of the things that that we'll see with like storage-based pricing. One of the problems that I see is companies basically taking their underlying cost structure and trying to sort of replicate that or mimic that with their pricing. So I'm charged for S3 storage, so I'm going to try to take that cost structure and somehow mimic that with my pricing to my customers, and that doesn't make any sense, unless it makes sense, but most of the time it doesn't, right? Yeah. So you need to sort of separate those things. So don't try to like pass on the cost of your storage when it's just minimal, to your customers. So one of the things that happens when you sort of base your pricing around something that's not really valuable, like like storage, is you'll see people maybe gaming the system. So if I'm on the edge of having to move up to the next pricing tier, and the only real difference is that storage, you might find people deleting objects, or their usage might slow. And what I like to say is, not only are they gaming your system, they're out looking for a company that actually understands them and understands the value that they're getting from it, right? Because you don't. You're so focused on storage, and I like that metric because I think it hits home, and it's something that happens across the board with all sorts of different types of companies. So you take the value that comes from understanding your customer, right? You take the value that they're getting, and that comes from understanding your customer. You take the metrics that you need to build your pricing around, and again, that could be it could be features, it could be things like storage, or it could be users, per seat. I mean, that really depends on your customers. Per seat licensing, that's the way that things were done in the enterprise world. That's the way that we tend to think of them, going forward. Users per seat, however you want to think about it. And I think that's just a carryover, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything unless it does. And let me be clear: if you're selling into an industry, and this goes back to the first point, knowing your customer. If you're selling into an industry that thinks about users or thinks about seats, then you have to figure out if you want to change it up. You don't want to be clever for clever's sake. You want to do something that's aligned. So, if you come in with something completely different, you might actually throw them off a little bit, and they're not going to feel comfortable doing business with you if that's the way they're used to doing business. So you need to understand your customers. So then there's all sorts of other things like, how do they want to buy? It's so easy to say, well, I want to do a monthly recurring fee. That's what I'm going to do. I want to be in the recurring revenue business. Well, that's cool. If that's how your customers want to buy. Now, it doesn't mean that they, just because they want to buy on an annual basis doesn't mean that that's not recurring revenue, but it changes the way that you put your pricing out there, right? A company that I'm working with, we're looking at some data, and it turns out 3/4 of the people that sign up for their product sign up for the annual version, and there's lots of reasons that could be the case, but that's an interesting piece of data that we need to now look at and see where do we go from there. We could maybe put the annual pricing as a little bit, or just put it out there first, rather than making them jump through separate hoops to go from the monthly pricing to the annual and that sort of thing. It could be that, and this goes back to knowing your customer. It could be that in some industries, especially older industries, ones especially where there's bigger companies, especially where you might be dealing with a procurement department. Some companies, if you offer a discount, if they were going to do business with you, so they've already made the decision to do business with you, and you then offer a discount, they have to take the discount. It's like their rules, right? So they can't sign up for the monthly plan because you offer a discount on the annual plan. On the flip side, I've seen companies, I've seen people who buy things on a company credit card, be willing to pay $100 a month on their company credit card because they can do that without any additional paperwork. So it's going to be $1,200 at the end of the year, right? They would rather do that than pay $600 for an annual discount, because that $600, even though it would save the company $600, would require additional paperwork. So if you didn't know that, you might try to do something different, and you might end up leaving a lot of money on the table, or you might end up not even being able to sell to that person because they're going to be like, I'm not going to do this. It's too much work. I'm going to go to your competitor that will allow me to pay the way I want to pay. So you have to know, how your customers are going to buy, and it could not be a credit card, right? So this isn't really a pricing thing, but it does sort of go into the whole commercial side of this, which is, you can't force a particular way of buying on your customers. There's a lot of stuff going on out there, that people don't really talk about. I have some clients that, they don't really care how you're going to pay. A lot of their folks, their customers, still pay by check. They invoice them every month. It's not all just credit cards, and we have to know how your market is going to pay. So there's all sorts of inputs in terms of pricing, and I can't think of them off the top of my head anymore. But there's lots of different inputs, and it really is individual to the company and to the market that they're serving, which is why I say don't copy other people. Don't copy what other companies are doing. Now, in terms of pricing page layout and things like that, there's some truth to the fact that I think we're used to that 3-column layout now. So if you come up with something very different, it better be really clear. right? Because we're so used to that three. But even within those three columns, people do it right. Some people really put no thought into it. When I say right, I mean there's a lot of stuff going on there. You have to. It's still a marketing page. So you have to do. You have to have like good headlines. You have to have social proof and trust factors and all that stuff. But even within the pricing, there's something called Goldilocks pricing, which is you have one that's too low. Maybe it doesn't have all the features. You have one that's really high priced. It's probably not going to be that. Probably nobody's really going to go for that. Then you have that middle one that's just right. And that's where you want to send people. But that's a lot of times, that one price is really what you want people to go for. So you put those others on there, those bookends, just as sort of arbitrarily put them on there. And, I think you end up confusing things because you end up with something that's not value oriented. Don't have prices just to have prices on there. We're seeing a lot of companies now sort of have one price and simplify it. Buffer or Help Scout. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, they like have just one price.
Yeah, no, right. No, Buffer does. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it simplifies it. Now, some could argue that those are maybe too low price. That's not my. They know their market, and by all accounts, they seem to be doing quite well. So the point is, though, don't do something just to do it. Understand why and what's going on. And I would say you'd be much better off with one price out of the gate that's really built around an understanding of your customers than trying to play these games. I'll tell you, because I think this will be interesting, but I could be wrong, so pay attention. A lot of the pricing sort of theories that we have today come from like the late 1800s. So I did a lot of studying like P.T. Barnum and stuff like that. I mean, and then a lot of the mail order stuff from the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's really interesting to see what was going on back then. A lot of the theories came from there. A lot of the sort of the vanity pricing, like 99 cents, things like that, all came from those times. What was interesting about that is, other than the direct mail letter that you might get, selling books or something, and the newspaper maybe once a week, maybe the store, just sort of the general store that you might go to once a week, you really didn't see prices, right? So it was really those, very seldom during a 1 week period would you actually see prices. So you could play these games with people and it would work. But those theories, I mean, have sort of been with us, and those tactics and those gimmicks have been with us for, well over 100 years. Lately, how many times a day do we see a price? I mean, exactly, it's constant. So I think that what we're seeing is sort of a backlash against a lot of those gimmicks, and you see this at high-end restaurants. They'll literally have just a nice round price. I'm seeing at fast casual restaurants. There's one that I go to here. It's a new one in town. Where every tax is even included. So sales tax is included. So it's a nice round price. It's like $10 for a burrito and a drink and a side. Very simple. So I think what we're seeing is this idea of simplicity coming back into play. So I don't want to say that across the board this is going to hold true, but people are inundated with prices, so we need to be thinking about how that might be changing. So I don't know that there's a lot of empirical evidence to that. I don't know that there's a lot of research into that. That's just my own observation, and sort of understanding where this stuff came from and trying to understand how it applies today. Yeah. So, long explanation there, but I think that really understanding your customers, understanding your goals, it's another thing. I mean, let's be honest. How many people go into, or let me take a step back. You get to basically pick your own customers, right? Anybody that complains about their customers has no one but themselves to blame. So if you go into the 99-cent store business, and all of a sudden the people that are coming in, you kind of wish weren't the people that were coming in. Sorry, you're the one that opened the 99-cent store, right? So we need to figure out, who do we want to do business with? And I think for a lot of startups that again have technical founders, but I would say that this is across the board. It doesn't just have to be a single technical founder. I think the idea is we want to be cheap, We want to make it really super simple for people to sign up online. We want to have, no touch, really. I hear that, I want no touch. What you want probably is very low human touch. You can still have a high touch automated system, but we basically want all these things that when you look at it means you're going to have a cheap product that's probably going to a market segment that maybe isn't ideal. So if you really understood your customers and understood the value that they were going to get from it, you would probably go into things a lot differently. So understanding the price and all the stuff that goes into it is great, but understanding who you want to do business with is super important. So quality versus quantity. A higher priced product certainly doesn't mean that you're going to have a small business. Can be very successful. It just means you're going to attract the right audience. The other thing is, while I said that value pricing is really based on what somebody's going to get from it, but let's explore that for just a second, because I think it's important. If you have a price that you want to charge, it doesn't much matter what it costs you to do that. If the market won't pay that, that's the issue. You either need to figure out a way to lower your price, maybe lower your costs, or increase value perception, go after a different market segment, right? So that's really important to understand, that if you want to go to a certain market, you better have the ability to support that market the way that they need to be supported. And so sometimes you go into a market with a $10 a month product, they're just going to laugh at you because they know full on you're not going to be able to support them in the way that they need to be supported. They'd pay 100 times that to get the appropriate support. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into pricing, and a lot of it is, at first it's all going to be based on your understanding of the customer, the way that they buy, and a lot of it's going to be your gut. And I've never seen anybody be able to sort of have this magic wand that they can wave and say, here's your perfect pricing right out of the gate. So it's an ever evolving thing.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: what do you think about freemium? It seems like it was super popular for a long time, and then just recently there's some people saying it's actually really hard to convert freemium people to paying people, and maybe it's not the best route for every startup, SaaS company, whatever. What do you think about it? Do you like freemium? And if you do, when do you encourage them to go freemium, and when do you encourage them just to charge out of the gate and don't look back? What do you think about those kind of things?
So yeah, freemium is interesting. I think you're right in terms of, or no, you are right in terms of the way that sort of things are being perceived out there, and I think that you're seeing a lot of companies sort of, I say pivot to profit. They're moving away from freemium and they're going
pivot to profit. That's the best pivot ever. I like that
one. Exactly. If I had to boil down why freemium doesn't work most of the time, it's the psychology. People come in thinking that they're going to get something free forever, and then you hit them up for money later on. It's a non-starter. It's just not going to happen. That's my very boiled down version of why it doesn't work. I think that ultimately, though, that comes down to managing expectations. If you look at a lot of, I would even say most freemium products out there, the process of getting a user into the system involves basically never telling them that there's a premium offering. So if you just said at some point, hey, just as a reminder, we have a premium version, that might change the psychological barrier that you're putting up of that penny gap, or however we want to look at it, so that later on when they hit that barrier or they see that offer, they're like, oh yeah, okay, I knew that was there. So just something like that. So LinkedIn, I just went through the sign up process the other day just to kind of see what was going on, and I think it's their second or third screen in their onboarding process. They tell you about their premium version. You can skip it. That's not meant to convert you as much as it is, and this is I'm just extrapolating here, but it's not meant to convert you as much as it is to remind you that there is a premium version. And then later on, of course, as you start using the product, they're gonna trigger messages to you to try to get you to go for their free trial of their premium version. So I think it comes down to managing expectations. Now, who should do freemium? I think you have to know your goals as a company. I think you have to figure out what it is you're trying to do. If and you could just be seeking to build a massive user base of free users that you will sell to somebody else to monetize, like Instagram, and that's cool. In that case, don't do freemium, do free. Forget the premium, just build that user base. But also understand that you're probably going to need, $100 million in VC money to be able to do that, or whatever. If you're bootstrapping, I'm thinking probably don't do freemium. Sell a product and make some money and do it that way. So it really depends on what your goals are. It also depends, once you figure out what you want to do, the next input would be the market. At some level, it is a numbers game because conversion rates are so small. The best freemium companies are still in the 3 to 5% conversion rate. Evernote is, I think, in the, I want to say upper single digits, but that's on a 6-month active user cohort. So it takes, of the people that are active users for 6 months, about 9 or 10% of those will convert, but overall it's like 1% or something like that. So I mean, it takes it takes a massive user base. So if you're going into the fitness center or gym management business and there's only like 35,000 gyms in the entire United States, is that really a big enough market to make a 3 to 5% conversion rate work for you? You have to know those things. You can't just say, I think it'll be great, I think it'll work. It's a process. And then we're starting to see lots of different flavors of freemium, which are very interesting. Like Yammer is a great example. $1.2 billion exit for them. It's awesome. They would basically come in sort of bottom up, let the people within an organization bring them in, and then they would come back in once some level of of penetration into the company happens. So maybe 25% of the people within an organization, they'd backfill data and say this company based on that domain has 1,000 employees. Once we get to 250 employees using it, then we're going to go back to their IT department and sell them, right? So that's a great way, and we're starting to see things like Dropbox and Box and those guys doing the same thing. They recognize they have 1,000 people within an organization all have a Dropbox account. Maybe it's time to go consolidate those. So it's 1,000 free accounts. You go in, you consolidate those at the enterprise level. Now that's a $500,000 annual account, because the people that are willing to pay for that control and that aggregate visibility and all that stuff, are willing to pay that money. The people that brought it in from the bottom up, they weren't. That's okay. So there's lots of different sort of takes on freemium, and I think that's what's most exciting about is the evolution. Yeah. But just about everybody is trying to figure out, how to get away from the very simple free forever with a premium upsell. That's hard. That's really difficult.
Well, talk to me a little bit about churn, because as I was structuring this interview, I thought about, okay, there's the pre-launch, there's the beta, there's pricing, and then another big kind of piece of the pie is churn. For a SaaS company, churn is massively important. I mean, if the churn's too high, it's hard to make the numbers work. What are some best practices to lower churn, to think about churn? What do you help people with there?
So the main thing you want to do to combat churn is to keep people as a customer. That was not
by definition.
So look, and here's the deal. I think we need to sort of define churn to begin with, and I think what we're really starting to see. I just got somebody just sent me a message through LinkedIn yesterday, and he used an acronym that I hadn't heard, which was DRR, which was no. I can't remember what the acronym was. Anyway, it's basically dollar revenue retention, DRR. I hadn't heard that before. I thought that was cool. He just said, what's important now? Is it customer churn? Is it this DRR? And I was like, well, no, definitely it's DRR. I just hadn't heard that. I was the other day where VCs were basically saying, look, the companies that are excellent from our perspective have a 95% customer retention rate and 110% revenue retention rate. So getting back to what churn is, churn generally means it's the people that leave at some point, right? But then there's a better way to look at it, I think, and that is revenue churn. Or now we're looking at instead of revenue churn, you're looking at revenue retention. So at the end of a year, we don't really care so much about how many companies leave or how many customers leave. What we want is to make sure that in that same group of people, our revenue actually went up, right? If you can do that, then we don't really care about the number of people leaving. So this is all the understanding of churn, the understanding of customer retention or customer success, and all these things that are driving that. It's definitely evolving quickly. But bottom line is you're right, especially in a recurring revenue business. But let's be honest, in any business, we don't want our customers to no longer be customers. So we want to make sure that they stick around. And one of the things that I've heard several times, and it's kind of annoying, is I just want to get customers now. I'll worry about retention later. And I just think that's such an amateur statement. That's so bad. I'm not saying that you have to dedicate a whole team to customer success at this point, especially if you're first starting out. But you have to think about, what can I do within my product to make sure that people are going to continue to stick around. The metric that I use, it's a metric, is engagement. And engagement, basically, the way that I define it is that means somebody is getting value from your product. What that means is that at various points within the life cycle, as a customer, they are going to be engaged in different ways, right? So you're sitting down to figure out you're building your product. You're thinking about all the different things that are going into that in terms of user experience and stuff. You're thinking about the onboarding process. You're thinking about once they're in the product, but a lot of times that's sort of it. Well, it's true that during the onboarding process, the engagement is going to be different than what you would need from 6 months from now. But most of the time, we don't think about, what does engagement look like 6 months? Once they've been a customer for 6 months, or 6 weeks, or 6 days, or 6 years down the road. Look, if you have a business plan and you've mapped this thing out, and you said our average expected lifetime is going to be 3 years. You better know what engagement looks like for a customer 3 years down the road. It doesn't mean you have to know it perfectly. It doesn't mean you have to, especially if you're just starting out and people haven't even been a customer for 3 days, but you kind of need to be thinking about that, because these are things that need to be built into the product. They're things that need to be built into your back-end systems, and they're things that need to be built into your organization. And most of all, they need to be part of your mindset. So, when you get a customer, you need to do everything you can to keep them. And so engagement, so, making sure that they get on board as quickly as possible. I like to say, get them to that wow moment. If you have something that's a wow moment, get them there as quickly as possible. If it's something that, you break it down into little wins, if they feel like they're making progress, we want them to do that. Pushback I get is often, my product is too complex. And I'm like, that doesn't fly, man. You can always simplify it. So simplify the process, get people in there, get them engaged, and keep them engaged, and look for things where engagement is going down. So I said earlier, if you have a storage-based pricing, and people are starting to delete things, that could be a churn threat. Those people could be on their way out. So you need to figure out how to sort of intervene and make sure that they're happy and will stick around. So churn is basically customers or dollars leaving. Retention is customers or dollars staying. But dollars for a company that's looking to build revenue, not a company that just has a bunch of free users. If you're looking to build revenue, then revenue churn or revenue retention is probably what the metric ultimately that you need to be focused on. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Let me ask you this, as you consult with these companies and you have kind of these mindsets, these philosophies, these best practices that you try to communicate to them and teach to them, what are the aspects of what we've talked about today, or maybe things we haven't talked about, that they have the hardest time with? Because I'm sure some of the things you say, they go, oh yeah, that sounds awesome. We never thought of it. Thanks for sharing, Lincoln. We're going to do it. Other pieces are probably like, I don't know. I think you're wrong here. What are the places you get a lot of pushback? Because I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah. It really, most of it is mindset stuff. So it is kind of this idea of just changing the way they think. So, most of the time, even though we don't really believe that if we build it, they will come, a lot of people believe that. So, because they're different, right? The rules don't apply to them. And I kind of see that, unfortunately, way too much. I think that's actually, that's a dangerous way to go about building any company. And I think so. It really comes down to you're getting out of this idea that your product is going to sell itself, that people are just going to come there, that you're going to have to put in some effort. One of the things I usually end up being almost a coach at some point. I mean, I had plenty of again, a lot on the technical side, but of founders that'll say, I don't like marketing. I'm not a marketing person. And I just think that's, yeah, you're right. And the more you say it, the more it's going to be true. So stop saying it. First of all, stop saying that you're not good at marketing and go figure out how to be good at marketing. You figured out how to write really great code, build scalable systems, and do all this other stuff. Marketing is a process. So let's go figure out how to make that process work. So it really comes down to, I think, just some weird beliefs that have been perpetuated. When I'm working with non-technical founders and executive teams, then you get into interesting things like that are just cultural. You get into silos, and with SaaS, the SaaS business architecture is really something where the product and marketing and finance and metering and billing and support, all that stuff comes together, right?
Yeah.
And in bigger companies or companies that are founded by serial entrepreneurs that came out of a bigger company, you instantly get into this very siloed world, and to come in and say you can't do that. At some level, these things have to all be brought together. In the olden days, we'd have a DVD with code on it. There's your product. Now everything else, you can sell it however you want, you can market it however you want, but there's your product. Well, in this world, your sales funnel has to be built into your product and continues into the product. Oh, and by the way, it never ends because there's upsells and cross sells and even downsells, and we need to have all of that sort of built in. The metering and billing has to flow directly to both your marketing, your behind the scenes marketing systems, as well as your finance, and it's an integrated business architecture. And so at the higher levels, it's figuring that out. With the very large companies that I've worked with, it's that SaaS DNA, and they'll be like, well, we want to go acquire a company so we can get that DNA in here, and it's like, you better keep it separate, because if that DNA comes in here, it's going to get rejected or eaten or whatever it happens, and that company, the DNA is basically not going to be enough to change your corporate culture. And so it runs the gamut depending upon the type of company that I'm working with. But most of the time, it is just coming into this business architecture with a preconceived notion of that doesn't fly with what needs to happen. So sometimes I am a coach, and sometimes I just have to be blunt and say, okay, you don't like marketing. Either you need to figure that out, or you need to get somebody in here that likes marketing, because without marketing, you don't have a commercially viable product. I mean, nobody's going to buy it, or at worst, and I want to touch on this. It's not that you're going to fail; it's that you're not going to grow substantially. You're going to stagnate. And I think, and maybe I'd be interested in your take on this. Actually, is just this idea that people are more afraid of stagnation than failure. Failure in this industry is almost, it's a badge of honor. And there's fail-con, right, or whatever. And, it's cool. I mean, I get that. I understand that. But I think even worse than failure is this idea that I'm going to build something and it's going to be mediocre. And then it's going to be a burden, right? And a lot of the companies that I work with are not failing. A lot of the companies I work with are doing doing great. They just want to do greater. But a lot of the companies, they've stagnated. Maybe it's due to high churn. Maybe they're pulling in a lot of new customers, but they're losing a lot out the back. Or maybe they're not getting a lot of new customers. They're doing just fine in terms of retention, but they can't figure out how to get new customers, so they've stagnated. That's the worst place to be, and I think that's where I think a lot of people get afraid. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, I think when I think about stagnation, it's almost like entrepreneurship without the entrepreneurship. You've created a business where you're just an employee running the day-to-day, and it's not exciting, it's not visionary, you're not conquering mountains. You're literally just working for the man again, only you're the man now. So stagnation, that's why it's terrible, because you created your own prison. Stagnation is worse than failure, because now you're working 9 to 5 without the hope of it breaking through because you know nothing's up and to the right. You're just running on the treadmill. Personally, I hate failure and I hate stagnation. If I'm not going up and to the right, I don't have anything to do with it. But no, I think you're absolutely right. Stagnation is a horrible fate. And you have to be willing to kill your own dogs, to say it bluntly. If something's not working, kill it. I mean, I've had products before that are making money but not making enough money. And so we just stop supporting them and we tell our customers, all right, that's that. We're going to turn it off on this date. It was a good run, because it's not worth it to support it. It's not worth it to go sideways. It's not worth it for me to have created my own prison and then live in it and act like everything's okay. And by killing those projects, I'm able to move on and do really exciting things and keep the entrepreneur alive in me and not killing it off with stagnation. So that's kind of my take on it.
Well, let me touch on that real quick. I've been thinking about that. I saw somebody wrote a blog post the other day. I don't remember what it was, but somebody that had several products. They killed off a couple of them because of lack of traction. And I got thinking about that. And you hear that, maybe not every day, but you hear that every once in a while. And I wonder if that lack of traction had anything to do with their lack of marketing. Or their lack of understanding about their customer, their lack of ability, or not ability, but their lack of interest in focusing on a specific customer segment. And so they put their product out there and just sort of let people come to it. And then it fails, and then they go, I didn't get traction, so I'm going to kill the business. It's like really interesting. And I think this goes back to something we talked about earlier, but not really, especially from the technical side, not really respecting what you've built. I mean, there's some stuff that I'm all for. I mean, I'm not married to anything here. If it's not working, get rid of it. But I wonder if a lot of times the it's not working isn't that it's not working, it's that you're not doing what's right to make it work. So I agree absolutely. I like to say a lot of times, especially when I talk to sort of legacy software or enterprise software companies, about going to the cloud or going to SaaS, there's no equity in source code. There might be equity in the IP and whatever, but there's, just because you've written code does not mean that there's something there. Right? It doesn't mean that somebody's going to buy it. So you have to figure out how to, again, it's a pretty hardcore analogy there, but yeah, sometimes you do have to take them out back and shoot them. It's for the betterment of everyone. I got that.
And whenever I had to kill projects, just to be clear, it was obvious they weren't working. And I could put in 100x more time and get 1x return. You know what I mean? It was that kind of scenario. And there was a lot of mistakes. It wasn't just one. I mean, my margins, that was one of the things I learned, is margins matter. So I stopped charging razor thin margins, trying to be competitive. And I just realized I was going to choose my customers, and they weren't going to be the dollar store customers. So that was one of the mistakes I made. There was customer acquisition mistakes. I mean, there's a million mistakes. And so I'm not in favor of killing things prematurely, because sometimes you got to run through brick wall after brick wall to make something work. But sometimes you can imagine I could run through 100 more brick walls and it doesn't matter. At that point, you got to turn it off and move on. And so you're absolutely right, though. There's no one case scenario. People say, are you in favor of failing fast? And it's like, well, I don't know. Like, tell me the details. Like, what are the real numbers and what does things really look like? Because I'm in favor of failing fast. If it's obvious, it's going to fail over the long term anyway. But if there's some hope there and you're just not really honing in on your marketing or who you're selling to, in that case, well, maybe let's not fail fast. Pivot may be an escape instead of, what it needs to be. So I think it's just all in the details, Let me ask you this. With all that you've seen, I want to give you a chance to brag a little bit, right? What are some of the success stories? What are some of the companies, and maybe you can name names, maybe you can't, but where you came in, there were specific problems that you noticed, you tweaked some things or maybe overhauled some things, and then things started to work. Because I think those examples are going to be good for you. People can come to you as a consultant, but also good to give people hope of like, oh, changes actually matter when they're done right and businesses turn around. Because some people have never actually seen a business turn around because of a smart decision, right?
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, it's interesting. And you started out, saying I'm a consultant. I'm probably a little bit different than a lot of folks that come on here who either work for the company that they're talking about, or they started the company and they can really talk about it. And I'm usually a little bit, because I don't remember where I've signed NDAs or where I haven't. So I usually just don't say things unless the companies have just absolutely given me explicit permission. So it's kind of it's definitely a catch-22. It's hard to
They
it's
can
hard
remain
to
nameless. That's all right.
yeah. But like just as an example, Project Bubble is a project management company out of UK. Stu was in my free trial dominator course, which he basically did a 240% increase in paid free to paid conversions in 30 days. Just simply making some changes to what happens during the free trial. From onboarding, making it simple to get started, getting people to go from that point where they've started in the free trial to actually using it. That's the thing is free trials, as an example, is this part of the sales process where we usually think it's like just a black box on a flow chart, but really there's a lot of stuff to it. It's another one of those things where we think just let them in, they'll kick the tires. But if it's an orchestrated process that's driving people to not just this is the thing, they think they're coming in to try the product, right? The companies that succeed with free trials don't have that, don't share that mindset. They know that that's what people think they're coming in to do, but we are actually here to get them to use the product, so that they're not even going to look at the other 7 products that are on their checklist, right? By the end of the trial or by the end of the first day, they're going to be actively using our product. So, Stu has written about that. He's been pretty explicit with some of the results from that. So, and all that was, changes to, what happens to the first in-app experience, changes to the email follow-up. It's amazing. We don't want to spam people. That's what I hear all the time. Look, spam is unwanted email. Okay, email is powerful. But I want to temper that in a second. But email can be very powerful. And I think a lot of the founders these days, we don't want to, because I think what happens is we forget that maybe in some cases we're not our customer, right? And so we might not like email, but our customers are just fine with it. And by the way, I would challenge anyone who says they don't like email to whether or not it's you really just don't like email at all, or it's you don't like email that sucks. If it's valuable, I bet everybody who says they hate email, I bet there's at least one email that they get every once in a while that they like. It's because that one adds value, right? So if but how many times a day do we get something from a company that's all about them, all about their product, all about the great thing that they did, and I'm just like, who cares? But when you get something from somebody that's about you or how to better yourself, cool. And even if there's an offer in there, or a call to action to go sign up, that's cool. The whole thing was really useful though, right? So email can be very powerful, and most companies that I see that are struggling really don't use it right at all. They'll send credentials right when somebody signs up for their free trial, and then it's a 30-day free trial. On day 31, they'll be like, your trial expired, or or maybe if they're really aggressive, on day 29 they'll say your trial expires tomorrow, and that's it. And then they wonder why things didn't work. So going back and making your email work in your favor is a great idea. Now that said, if everything else is terrible, then email isn't probably going to be that effective. So I could sit here and tell all the stories of where we've had successes with that, but I've seen failures. I've come in and companies want me to just help them rework. I will never do this again. I did this for one company. They brought me in to help revamp their emails during the follow-up on a trial, and I found a whole bunch of things that were wrong within the product itself. The email was going to send somebody back into the app, but not to the right place. So it was not going to be this streamlined process. So I said, you need to make these changes. I ended up giving them their money back because it was not going to work, and I will never ever do that again, because I'm not going to come in and just do email for you. If there's other stuff that is not working, I'm going to tell you about that, and we're only going to work together if you are willing to look at everything that needs to be changed. It's all a part of the process, right? So that's one. Storm Pulse is a company that has publicly said that we work together. We're working right now to do some. They've got some really great stuff in terms of getting people to that wow right now. But we worked on pricing with them. They went from a freemium product with a million or so hits a month. I mean, it was crazy because people basically were treating them like the Weather Channel, and they had people using their product for free. There's stories out there all over the place. I suggest definitely go find it and read about them. They basically had people like ExxonMobil using their product to plot their $1 billion oil rigs in the Gulf on their map for free, right? And or for $40 a month or something like that, maybe. And it was just like, we talked to them and said, look, you have to understand the value that your customers are getting. So they went from freemium to like $400 a month to like $4,000 or something. I mean, or $400 a year to like $4,000. So they've just exponentially raised their prices because they understand their customers. And every time they do that, if you look at the Stormpulse site today, it's all about like different use cases. If you go there and you are a logistics person, you quickly get to the point where they're speaking your language as a logistics person or a supply chain person, and you're going to come in, and it's just they've streamlined that whole process. So those guys they basically went from almost going out of business to hundreds of thousands, million. I think they got to $1 million in ARR really quick. Now they're 500 startups funded them, and so. That's a great sort of success story from all sorts of things, from pivoting away from freemium to raising their prices, to streamlining the onboarding process, using email the right way, all those things. Lots of different things like that. But I wanted to mention that sort of that failure. It wasn't a failure. It just didn't move the needle, right? And I was so fed up with them. It was just a bad experience. And one of only a handful of times I've ever given somebody their money back, and every time it was because I mismanaged expectations. Right? I said, well, okay, let's hit it. Let's figure this out, and didn't really do anything. So you have to understand, but if you're not doing any email, maybe something will work. And sometimes it's not an email follow-up sequence. Maybe just adding some transactional messages that sort of drive people. If somebody hasn't added any projects, if they see an email from you and it says there's no projects, that could be a motivator to go add projects. But one thing that I like to talk about is never having a dead end. You see this all over the place. Even SlideShare sends out messages that say, this was the catalyst for like a blog post that I did. SlideShare sends me an email every week that says, here's how your presentations have been doing, and they'll have like a red down arrow on them, which is sad. And not all of them, but there's no like, what do I do to fix that? Right? You haven't given me a way. What if they had a link that said, get more views? Click here, and then it went to a blog post or a video or something or even just another share button that allowed me to then tweet it to my followers again. Don't forget to close those loops. And so you see that. Email marketing companies could do the same thing. How many times do you say, well, here's the results of your campaign. You had all these unsubscribes, you had these bounces, whatever, and I'm like, thank you. I don't know what to do with that information. What if you gave me a way to go back and figure out how to fix that? So little things like that. So even if you're doing transactional messages and not doing a big, that could be during your trial, it could be during regular use. Close those loops, positive feedback. Let me actually do something, and the result is going to be a happier customer, that is able to take advantage of what you're doing. Otherwise, how many things are you doing right now that are causing frustrations for your customer? Right, that's a big deal. The other thing is, I think this is super important. Ask for the sale. During your free trial or during, even freemium, at some point, just don't be afraid to ask for the sale. If you built a product, you've gone through this process of actually putting something out there. At some level, you must feel like it's worthwhile, right? Maybe you even feel like, yeah, the product itself, it's really good. It solves a problem. Then don't be afraid to ask people to buy it, because if you believe that it's useful to them, then you should believe that it's okay to put it in front of them. So I'm in favor of being even maybe a little bit more aggressive than you would feel comfortable with within the confines of the reality of who your customers are. You have to be cognizant of that. But I would rather kind of err on the side of being a little bit aggressive than not. Otherwise, if you don't ask for the sale, don't be surprised when you don't get it.
Yep.
So,
well, Lincoln, this has been an incredible interview. I mean, I've learned a lot personally. I don't think we've had a deep dive into SaaS this far, especially on the pricing, because there's a lot about pricing and freemium and those kind of things here. And that was needed on Growth Hacker TV. So again, thank you for coming on the program and sharing your expertise.
Absolutely. Thank you.